All right, and we are back. So good afternoon this time. We already had one this morning. So good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to White Sands Self-Care Community. I am your host, Laura Cross, and your resource for self-care. And I am so happy to have with me today, Terry Tucker. He is a motivational speaker, an author, an international podcast guest on the topics of motivation, mindset, and self-development. He has a business administration degree in the Citadel, where he played an NCAA Division I college basketball, a master's degree from Boston University, and in his professional career, Terry's been through marketing executive, a hospital administrator, a SWAT team negotiator, a hostage negotiator, which is just wow, a high school basketball coach, a business owner, a motivational speaker, and for the past 11 years, a cancer warrior, which has resulted in the amputation of his foot in 2018 and his leg in 2020. He is also the author of the book Sustainable Excellence, 10 Principles to Leading Your Uncommon and Extraordinary Life. And if it's one thing I would say you've had as an extraordinary life, that is just wow.
Well, Laura,
But
thanks for
Terry,
having me on.
yeah, thank you. It's funny that we meet, because you're in Colorado. I used to be there, but it's funny how small the world kind of
It
can
really
be.
is. You're absolutely right. Yeah.
Yeah. So tell me, so what do you believe your purpose in life was or is?
Yeah, and that's that word purpose. We tend, I think, to think of it as something that's in the singular, that there's one thing that we're supposed to do. And at least from my perspective, in my life, I kind of feel it's been purposes, plural. When I was younger, I was an athlete. I played college basketball, and then I really felt my purpose, although I had jobs in the private sector, was to be in law enforcement. And as you mentioned, I was a hostage negotiator. And now I think my purpose has switched again with my cancer diagnosis. And in all honesty, probably coming towards the end of my life, to put more goodness, positivity, motivation, love back into the world as I possibly can. So, I think a lot of people tend to think that my purpose has to be my job or my occupation. And it doesn't. I mean, your job could be what you do over here to pay the bills, but your purpose is over here to be a podcast host, to be a writer, to be an activist, to be whatever you feel is in your heart. And I'll end with this, especially when I talk to young people. I always tell them, if there's something in your heart, something in your soul that you believe you're supposed to do, but it scares you, go ahead and do it. Because at the end of your life, the things that you're going to regret are not going to be those things you did. They're going to be those things that you didn't do. And by then it's going to be too late to go back and do them.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you 100%. That's why I was, you can do a job and you can make ends meet, but if you're not truly happy, to me, life is way too short to do stuff to figure out who you are, like you said, what your purpose is and what you're truly happy. To me, that's a more fulfilling life than just going through doing what you're supposed to do and doing the job. Cause I think we were meant for a whole lot more.
We were. And I think Viktor Frankl, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning and was a Holocaust survivor, he says in there, and I'm going to kind of mess the line up a little bit, but that we all have a purpose in life and that we have a moral obligation to find that purpose and to live it out. And I've seen so many people that never even look for it. I mean, they just kind of muddle through life and they're not happy. They're not miserable, but they're not happy. They're not fulfilled because they've never looked. They've never, what is my purpose? What am I supposed to do here? I agree with you. I think that we're all put here for a reason. It's just not a random, go hang out on Earth for a while and then die. There's a reason we're all here. We all have unique gifts and talents, and we should use those gifts and talents, I think, to find and live our purpose.
Yeah. And I think we very seldom slow down enough in life to even figure out or realize what our purpose is. I always call it a rat race. You get stuck in one rat race or another and you just say, woohoo, I'm happy. I mean, just because you're not upset about something, you're not angry or things are going, doesn't necessarily, you might be happy, but you might not be truly happy.
Yeah, you're not fulfilled. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, happy, but not fulfilled. You don't have, you still have that yearning in your heart and your soul that yeah, this just isn't it yet. You know, what is it that I'm looking for? And like I say, so many people I just don't think they sort of give up. They quit. They sort of bench themselves and say, okay, you know what? I'm good where I am. I'm not going to find that purpose. And I don't know. My life has always been about wanting to find it. And
Hmm.
then once I found it, to putting everything I had into living it.
Yeah, and I mean, being a motivation speaker and stuff and going what you've been through, to me, that is truly inspirational. You had 11-year battle with cancer, and I'm sure it has taught you a lot of lessons. Can you maybe describe kind of what that's been like for you?
Yeah. So, I mean, 2012. So I guess it's been almost 12 years now that I was diagnosed with a rare form of melanoma. And most people think of melanoma as too much exposure to the sun and it affects the melon, the pigment in our skin. Mine has nothing to do with that. Mine appeared on the bottom of the feet. Uh, this form appears on the feet or the hands, and it has nothing to do with sun exposure. And when I was diagnosed, I was literally given a death sentence. They said, if you have a miracle, you might live 5 years, but more than likely you'll be dead in 2 years. And I thought, well, I got a death sentence. Maybe I could turn that death sentence into a life sentence. And that's what I've really tried to do over these last 11, almost 12 years now, is to is to put as much goodness, positivity, motivation, to find a purpose in life. When I graduated from college, my father was dying. And I remember spending many nights laying down with him, you know, while he was dying. And he had a purpose in life. He had end-stage breast cancer. And they told him to go home and die because in the 1980s, they didn't really know how to deal with a man with breast cancer. And he lived another 3.5 years after his diagnosis. And I believe he did because he had a purpose.
Mhm.
He was in real estate. He loved real estate. He actually worked up till 2 weeks before he died. And I sort of tucked that in the back of my mind and said, well, when it's my turn in the barrel, I'm going to need to have that purpose. And I'm still being treated. I have tumors in my lungs. I'm still being treated every third week for an entire week at the hospital. And during these 2 weeks off, I write. I am a guest on podcasts. I'm working on another book, and that I need that purpose. That gives me something to do. And my wife and I will constantly, not constantly, but occasionally have these discussions, I will call them, about, hey, you need to rest. You need to build your blood counts back up and stuff like that. And my response is usually, I get plenty of rest when I'm dead. These things energize me.
Mhm.
Having discussions with people like you and that, they give me purpose. And that's really kind of where I am right now in my life.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people may not necessarily believe or they call it woo woo, but mindset and the positivity, having that purpose, I mean, that is to me 90% of the battle. I mean, when you've got that, you're not giving things a place to just dwell and keep growing and go because you're driven another way. It all depends on what you're believing. Everybody's got different beliefs and stuff, but yeah, I've seen a lot of people change a lot of things around just by being positive, finding different holistic things or whatever it is. And yeah, I know a number of people, and it just amazes me in our system. And like you said, doctors basically tell you your death sentence. Hey, not much we can do for you. You got this amount of time. With all the technology and all the stuff we have out today, people are still being told that a lot
They
of
are.
times.
And I mean, doctors I kind of equate them to Vegas. You know, they're playing the
Mhm,
odds. They know, you know, a person with your age and your relative health status has this particular disease in this particular stage. Well, put all that in you know, on a roulette wheel and roll the dice. I think you've got about this much time left. What doctors don't know is that you want to see your daughter graduate from high school, or you want to walk your daughter down the aisle at her
mhm.
wedding, or you want to live long enough to see your grandchildren born. And that mental part of it, the mind absolutely rules the body. And what doctors can't figure into that equation is your mental status, how tough you are, how resilient you are, how you deal with adversity. And if you're one of those people that are like, yeah, okay, I've got cancer. Well, you know what? I can't do anything about the cancer, but I can deal. What I can do is how I deal with that cancer. I can do something about that. And when you put that mental part of it, that mindset part into that equation, then you could throw out all the, you've got 2 years to live, you got 5 years to live, whatever it ends up being. I always laugh because I was initially treated at the MD Anderson Cancer Center in Houston, probably one of the best, if not the best cancer hospitals in the country. And every year in April, I get a letter from their tumor board that basically says, circle one of these three. Are you alive with cancer? Are you alive without cancer? Or are you dead? And I joke, I keep
Are you
hanging around because I
dead?
haven't figured out how to circle number three yet,
Yeah.
So, but I do, I
Wow.
mean, that's kind of
Yeah.
a joke, but I do get that letter every year. The third one is framed a little bit differently, but they want to know. And it's like, I love circling that. Yeah, I'm alive, but I still have cancer. Here you go. Year 12. Hopefully it'll be
Yeah.
year 13, year 14, year 15, because they don't know my mind. They don't know my mindset. They don't know what I want to do. And I absolutely want to hang around as much as or as long as I possibly can.
No, and even from like our little experience, wasn't cancer. My fiance was with the diabetes, but you could tell by the doctor's reactions, they're not used to having people have a more positive, attitude towards it, because they were all very concerned. They're like, you realize we're talking about losing a toe, or you might even lose your foot. And I told them, I said, I watched Shark Week. I've seen Paul DeGelder. He lost an arm and a leg, and he still swims with the sharks and has a very vibrant life. I said, we're good. We're not talking about losing an entire leg, or, even if we did, it's not his life. We got things we can get around this. And they're like, and they were just shocked. And they're like, that's a good attitude to have. And I'm like, yeah, we got this.
Well, and that's just it. I mean, when I was diagnosed, I remember the doctor asked to see my wife out in the hospital, or out when we were at the hospital, out in the hall, and said to her, he's probably only going to live 2 years. I'm going to have to tell him that. Is he going to be okay with that? My wife tells the story much better than I do. And she said, I looked at her and said, yeah, you go ahead and tell him that. You have no idea who you're dealing with, and we'll see how this goes.
Yeah, and I mean, you can't blame them, but but you can tell, obviously you are an exception. That's not what they normally come across.
No, I think doctors a lot of times experience, and I've seen this. I've seen patients. I've seen so many patients over these last 12 years now that literally I get a cancer diagnosis, or as you mentioned, a diabetes diagnosis, whatever it is, and they just turn their life over to somebody in a white coat with initials after their name. And I've always wanted my life to be shaped by the decisions that I made, not the ones I didn't make or the ones that somebody made for me. And so I've never been one of those people that, my doctor needs to explain to me why we're going to do this. And not in medicalese. I need to be able to understand it. I'm not that
Right.
smart, but you need to bring this down to my level and why we're going to do that. And if it makes sense, then fine, we'll go ahead and do it. But I want to know. I want to be involved. I mean, when I had found out I had my leg amputated, my doctor wanted to start me on chemotherapy after that. And I remember looking at him and saying, is it going to save my life? And he said, probably not. He said, but it might buy you some more time. And I was 8 years into this fight. I'd had my foot amputated back in 18, and this was right after the COVID pandemic. And I'm like, well, if the outcome's going to be the same, I'm not sure I want to go through all that ugliness of chemotherapy, but I'll go home and talk to my family. And this literally, it's a funny story, but it happened this way. So I go home and I start talking to my wife and daughter. And my daughter's immediately, all right, we need a family meeting. I'm like, family meeting? There's three of us. It's not like we got a board here or something like that, So,
Right.
so we sit around the kitchen table and individually talk about how we feel about me having chemotherapy. And then when we're done with that, my daughter's like, all right, let's take a vote. How many people want dad to have chemotherapy? And my wife and daughter raise their hand. I'm like, wait a minute. Am I getting outvoted for something that I don't want to do? But I remembered when I was back in the police academy, our defensive tactics instructor used to have us bring a photograph of the people we loved the most to class. And as we were learning different techniques to defend ourselves, we were to look at that photograph because he reasoned you will fight harder for the people you love than you will fight for yourself. So I ended up taking chemotherapy, certainly not because I wanted to, but because my wife and daughter wanted me to. And in hindsight, it was the right move. It was a bridge that got me to the drug that I'm on now. But if it would have been up to me, you and I wouldn't be having this conversation right now.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's always hard to judge too, as to, what if, but
Right.
obviously that turned out well.
Right.
So, and we've talked a lot here about positivity and purpose and stuff. Would you say that that is your common denominator that's helped you through or help you overcome the traumas and stuff that you faced in life, or is
I
another?
would say certainly that's part of it. I think the other part of it that I learned from playing team sports, and for me, it was sports. I mean, I started playing basketball when I was 9 years old and played all the way up until I graduated from college when I was 21. And I think what team sports taught me, and I think it can be taught by any team event, whether it's your family, your colleagues, your friends, whatever it is. But what team sports taught me was the importance of being part of something that's bigger than yourself. You realize on a team that if you don't do your job, not only do you let yourself down, but you let your teammates down, your coaches down, your fans down, your parents down, etc. And if you think about it, the biggest team game that we all play is this game of life. And I've been on this clinical trial drug now for a little over 3 years that more than likely is not going to save my life. It is keeping the tumors in my lungs stable, but they're still there. They haven't gone away. And the way I look at that is I'm willing to go. I'm willing to have the side effects of that medication every 3 weeks because maybe 5 years from now, 10 years from now, based on the data that the doctors are gleaning from my blood tests and my scans and stuff like that, maybe they'll tweak that drug enough that it can save somebody's life. And for me, that's being part of something that's bigger than myself. I'm probably not going to be here when that happens. And that's okay, because my legacy will be something that will live on after me in the people that this drug helps.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a good way to look at that too. I like that. So what are four truths and how did you come up with them?
Yeah, the four truths, I have them on a Post-it note here in my office. So I see them multiple times during the day and they constantly get reinforced in my mind. The honest, how did I come up with them? I was on a podcast that was called The Three Truths. So I needed to come up with three truths.
A fourth one.
That's the honest truth. I needed to think about that. And then I added a fourth one. And I was really hesitant because as human beings, we kind of like things in threes, ABC, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. We like things in threes, but I thought, nah, I gotta add this fourth one. And so I'll give them to you. They're just one sentence each. And like I said, I have them here on this Post-it note. So the first one is control your mind, or your mind is going to control you. The second one is embrace the pain and the difficulty that we all experience in life, and use that pain and difficulty to make you a stronger and more resilient individual. The third one, and this is the one that I added, I look at kind of as a legacy type of truth. And it's this: what you leave behind is what you weave in the hearts of other people. And then the fourth one is, as long as you don't quit, you can never be defeated. And I look at these four truths and I kind of call them the bedrock of my soul. I think they're just a good place to start to try to build a quality life off of.
Yeah, absolutely. I like those. That's good. And there's nothing wrong with being out of the box and creating your fourth.
Exactly. I mean, that legacy, that what do you leave behind in your life, especially younger people, don't think a lot about that. You don't think about the end game of your life. You're concentrated on the here and now. When you get cancer, you tend to think a lot more about the end game.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I'm sure you do. So, how did you come to write that book, The Sustainable Excellence 10 Principles to Leading Your Uncommon and Extraordinary Life?
Yeah, it was not a book that I wanted to write. I was not really looking to write a book. But it's funny. There's an old joke that says when we talk to God, it's called prayer. When God talks to us, it's called schizophrenia. So God never told me to write a book, but I think what God did is put people in my path that started to make the same suggestion over and over and over again. And I initially was kind of, no, I don't really want to do that. But then more people suggested it. And the book was really born out of two conversations I had. One was with a former player that I had coached when I was coaching girls' high school basketball in Texas, who had moved to the area in Colorado with her fiance, where my wife and I live. And the four of us had dinner one night. And I remember saying to her after dinner that I was excited that she was living close and I could watch her find and live her purpose. She got real quiet for a while. And then she looked at me and she said, well, coach, what do you think my purpose is? I said, I have absolutely no idea what your purpose is, but that's what your life should be about. Finding the reason you were put on the face of this earth, using your unique gifts and talents, and living that reason. So that was one conversation. And then I had a young man reach out to me from college on social media, and he asked me what I thought were the most important things that he should learn, not to just be successful in his job or in business, but to be successful in life. And Laura, I didn't want to give him that, get up early, work hard, help. I didn't want to give him the sort of cliches that we already know. I wanted to see if I could go deeper with him. So I spent some time and I was taking some notes and eventually kind of had these 10 thoughts, these 10 ideas, these 10 principles. And so I sent them to him. And then I stepped back and I was like, well, I got a life story that fits underneath this principle, or I know somebody whose life emulates that principle. So literally during the months that I was healing after I had my leg amputated, I sat down at the computer every day and I built stories, and they're real stories about real people underneath each of the principles. And that's how sustainable excellence came to be.
Wow. That's pretty amazing. I love that too. Even when you're healing, you just keep going.
Yeah, purpose. It was something to do, and there wasn't anything good on Netflix, so I thought, what the heck, I'll write a book.
So what's for you in the future? What are you doing? You doing more podcasts? Do you work with people, or what's on the horizons for you?
Yeah, I am doing more podcasts. You're the third one I've done today, and I have had such an amazing time with podcasts. I started in podcasting. I'd started a speaking business just as COVID hit. And like so many other people and so many other businesses, I had to figure out a different way to deliver my services because nobody was doing anything either in person or virtually. And somebody had reached out to me and said, would you like to be a guest on my podcast? And I'll never forget this, Laura. I literally looked at him, I'm like, sure. What's a podcast? I had no idea what a podcast was. And he explained it to me. And I said, sure, I'll do it. And I remember the first podcast I did, I had Post-it notes all around the camera, and he would ask me a question and I would lean in and read the Post-it note. I was horrible. I was terrible. I provided no value to anybody who listened to that podcast. But then I thought, I enjoy this. And I think I have a message that can help people. And you know what? I wasn't any good when I first started learning how to drive a car, or first time I cooked a meal, or the first time I studied algebra. So you get good at it. You practice. And I listen to every podcast I've ever been on, and I'm probably closing in on about 700 podcasts that I've done around the world. And I want to have better stories. I want to see how many times I say or use those filler words. I just want to get better for two reasons. One, to provide an audience that gives me part of their time with some value, and two, to make the host feel like, yeah, this was worth my time as well. So yeah, I'm doing podcasts. I'm working on another book right now. I'm writing. I just had an article published about what it takes to have a good podcast, even though I've never had my own podcast, but I've been on so many of them, I can kind of give you an idea. And so, yeah, I'm doing stuff to keep myself busy and continuing to be treated for my cancer.
So it's funny you say that because I'm on the opposite end. Everybody kept saying, "Oh, I want to be on your podcast." I'm like, "I don't have a podcast. I do live interviews." And then from live interviews, I went to an online TV show. Everybody just like interchanges, all those words. And the only reason I did the TV show because it was longer and I wanted to be able to reach more people. And having that network allowed us to tap into a huge existing audience that was already there. And and it's been growing. And yeah, if you ever watch, well, I've removed a lot of them, so you can't see them now. But if you ever watch from the very first time I first started doing stuff, like when I used to do Travel Talk Wednesday and do stuff, yeah, you get so frustrated. And I can hear my speech teacher if I say, this, that, and I stopped getting mad. I stopped getting hung up about it because I'm like, you know what? It just shows me I'm real. You make mistakes. We're not all perfect just because we got a camera in front of our face. But I would say your first podcast, you're saying you had no value. I will guarantee you had value for somebody. I will guarantee there will be some. I can't see you talking and not having some kind of value to somebody in some way.
Well, thank you for saying that. It's funny because about 6 months ago, I got an email from a young man who I had no idea who he was. And he said, I just listened to your podcast and I needed to hear that. I needed to hear your message on this podcast. And I said, great. I said, what was the name of the podcast? And he told me, and I was like, oh, I don't remember that one. And I went back and I looked, and it was a podcast I had done 2.5 years ago that he had found the episode, and it resonated with him.
Mhm.
And that's the great thing about what you're doing. And that is that these things they're evergreen. They'll always be there. And if somebody, at some point in time reaches out 10 years from now and here's a podcast that you did that resonates with them, you're still making a difference in somebody's life. And that's what I love about this format that we're so privileged to do, because I'm old enough to remember when we had rotary dial phones in the kitchen, and that was the extent of our communication. So,
We had
cell
those.
phones and this type of technology for me is absolutely amazing.
Yeah, yeah, especially since you don't have to have the all
Yeah,
while you connect. And those of us that are old enough will remember those screechy noises while your
yep.
thing's trying to connect. And yeah, I think we'd probably all go into coma nowadays if we were waiting for one of those to come up, nor could we do what
Right.
we're doing. But yeah. Yeah, it's funny because, well, I think you and I are really close, around the same age, but it's like, what was great was rock for us is now called classic rock. I'm like, okay, not in my book, but to everybody nowadays, our music is now classic.
Well, I was kid with my daughter because it's like my music, my era, my 70s music, I could understand the words, and words rhymed with words that were real words. Not today where they're rhyming words with words that aren't even words, and so we go back and forth. But it's every generation, I'm sure, experienced that. Oh, my generation was better than your generation. As we continue to evolve, I think about the cancer that I have today. If I had that during my father's generation or my grandparents' generation, no way I'd still be here today. And that, so the way technology moves forward and makes our lives better, I think is amazing. And I'm glad people are out there developing that and not sitting back and saying, oh, it's good enough. No, it's never good enough. Keep developing.
Yeah, keep going, keep figuring it out. And yeah, I don't remember the exact statistic, but Americans, we have like the largest dictionary, and we keep adding more and more things that are now words that weren't words.
Exactly.
We
Right.
we just keep growing.
Yeah. If enough people use it, it becomes a word, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. Next thing you know, it's like, okay, it's like everybody says a hashtag. It's like, no, it's a pound sign.
Right. Right.
It stands for pounds. Now it's hashtags. It's like, well, okay, we have a couple meanings now.
Right.
But anyway, it's funny with the times. But Terry, I want to thank you for taking the time. What is the best way for people to connect with you or get your book? Share that with them.
Yeah, sustainable excellence. You can get anywhere. You can get a book online, Amazon, BarnesandNoble.com, Apple iBooks, wherever you get your books, you can get sustainable excellence. You can get in touch with me. I have a blog/website called Motivational Check. Every day I put up a thought for the day, and with that thought usually comes a question about how maybe you could apply it in your life. Recommendations for books to read, videos to watch. You can leave me a message. That's all at motivationalcheck.com.
Okay. And I will make sure we put that in the comments because,
Thank
yeah,
you.
I'm sure a lot of people are going to be able to relate or can definitely have value with that because you are truly an inspiration with everything you've gone through. And I love the whole positivity in your attitude. So thank you very much for taking the time to be here with everybody today.
Well, Laura, thanks for having me on. I really enjoyed talking with you.
Oh, you bet. It's been a pleasure. And we'll catch everybody. Have a wonderful and safe weekend. And we will see you all next week.